Welcome back to the Direct Response Podcast. I'm your host, Travis Ketchum, founder of Campaign Refinery, joined today with David Cartolano of Wealthy Inbox. Hey, man.
Hey, how you doing, Travis?
I'm doing good. So this one's a little bit less tactical and hands-on, like a lot of our other episodes are, but I think it's still an important one to think about, and that is basically how to build, like, what is a brand experience, and then how to strengthen that customer loyalty through a brand. And so, it feels a little bit fluffy, but it is an important aspect. Now, some people take it too high of importance and they spend too much time obsessing about their brand. But let's just talk about, like, what is a brand experience in your eyes, and then I have a way to kind of summarize it for myself. But what is a brand experience to you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to quote Alex Hormozy on this because I think he defined brand way better than I've heard anybody define it. And he defined it by saying, brand comes from literally sticking metal on cattle. So that way people knew how to treat the cattle, if it was yours, if it wasn't yours, if it was part of a big company's. And your brand is pretty much like what promises you're making to people and how well you keep them. So when you hear Gucci, you know what type of promises they're making. You know what type of products they're selling. When you hear McDonald's, you know what kind of promises they make and what kind of products they sell. So brand is what other people think of you, which you shouldn't care about, but your reputation is really important because word of mouth is so powerful in either direction, good or bad. So that's how I see brand.
Yeah, so a really good description of it that I heard many, many, many years ago, to the point that I can't remember where I actually originally heard it. I wish I could give them their flowers where it's due. But the thing that distilled for me was your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. Because so often as business owners, we feel that we can completely control the narrative and we can just tell people what it is. And so it's kind of laughable when you see some of these big companies, go through a rebrand and they're like, well, our brand is now XYZ. And it's like, for example, if you're I'm going to throw shade. So, like, let's say you're a GM vehicle and you're suddenly saying we're about dependability, reliability, and luxury. It doesn't matter what you say. Decades and decades and decades of customer experiences that have formed their opinions of what your brand is, regardless of what you say it is, right? And then sometimes your brand can be associated with things that are even bigger than the product or thing that you think you're selling. So being a car enthusiast in general, I don't want to get too political on this podcast, but I'm not only into cars, but I'm into electric vehicles, and I've owned Tesla and Rivian and some other stuff. So when you think about that, right, there tends to be an identity association with some of these brands. What it meant to be, let's say, a Tesla owner in 2013 might mean something very different than what someone perceives to be a Tesla owner in 2025, based on things that are far outside of what that symbol stands for in terms of, we usually think of product quality or innovation or whatever. That can extend beyond the normal attributes. That can become a political statement for better or for worse. An EV brand at all can be a political statement for better or for worse, right? And then you think about, like with Rivian, it's usually, okay, well, there's the ruggedness and the design aesthetic and things like that you think as product attributes. But then you think about the emotional attributes of the brand, which is outdoorsy, adventurous, like, going to far-flung places. And like, there's this aspirational element to the brand, which I think you can say of a lot of other luxury brands. Like you mentioned Gucci, but if you go into the more obscure luxury brands, they become really aspirational, right? Like there's a reason that when you see an advertisement for a high-end watch, sometimes the watch isn't even in the damn ad, right? It's of someone like on a fancy boat with some kind of dark liquor. It's that the brand becomes this like abstract lifestyle that they're trying to associate themselves with, and the brand logo will be in the corner. You might not even see any product placement at all. And so it's a very interesting thing that brand can be this like strong emotional tie that isn't necessarily to the feature benefits we all think about in the direct response mindset so often, right? Totally. So, okay, now that I got my long-winded answer out of the way, how can you use a brand to strengthen customer loyalty? Because there's, as we just mentioned, there's a lot of attributes, right? There's the binary, the product stuff, and then there's the emotional stuff, the political stuff, the how does it make you feel kind of stuff. And so how can you use these elements, the cocktail of the objective and the subjective, to strengthen customer loyalty with your product
Yeah.
or service?
I can speak to mine's experience in a newsletter that I have, which is faceless, by the way. So this is a brand. I had to build a brand. And one of the things that I'm very, very particular about is how does a newsletter need to make the ideal customer feel? And I'm very particular about that. And I'm constantly asking for feedback, like one on one, like founder to person on the newsletter saying, did you like this? What can we do to help? Like, how do we make this a better experience for you? And I'm just waiting for somebody to say, I hated it. This was awful. Change everything. Because I'm tired of hearing like, oh, this is great. This is great. This is good. Please keep it the way it is, which to me, it's frustrating from a feedback perspective. But from a branding perspective, I know that what they have come to expect from the first welcome email and even before that, but on the opt-in page, what we're telling them they're going to receive from this newsletter. And it is an emotional benefit because it is B2C. Lost my train of thought, got it back. That emotion, that feeling that they are getting from this newsletter, they are going to be getting it every single time. And just being relentless around how do I almost said the name of the brand, and I'm not going to do that because I want to sell it. How do I get the customer to associate insert brand name with this feeling? And we tell them, we're going to email you every day. It's going to be about X, Y, and Z. We're going to show you some products that you might like. And if you don't like this, you can unsubscribe. So when I think of brand experience and how to integrate it, that's really what it is. It's like, how do I want my customers to feel? How do I want my subscribers to feel? And what am I doing to support that? And it takes work. It takes work and it's exhausting, but it's something that I think is really valuable when, whether you're building a personal brand or a faceless one, people are going to brand you whether you like it or not. So it's like, can I control the narrative up front compared to having people come to it later?
Yeah, that's definitely a great example. I also try to think about things in the offline world more than the online world because
Good
they
point.
tend to be better at this skill. Like the
Yeah.
online world tends to be really good at acquisition, you know, delivering little micro optimizations and wins along the way. But when you think about the offline world, I try to think about big established brands that have done something that feels like it stood out. So I'm going to use two examples that are doing a very similar thing, even though they have completely different impressions about the luxury status of the brand, for example, but they're using the same mechanism. So the two examples that I want to use is actually Nordstrom's and Costco. They are
Nice.
doing
Okay.
the same thing to create intense, rabid loyalty. So the thing that Nordstrom did that I think Costco probably copied, I'm not sure who did it first, but I'm pretty sure Nordstrom did it first. The thing about Nordstrom, right, you go in and it's usually luxury goods. You're not necessarily going to get the lowest possible price, but you're going to get, from the moment you walk in, the Nordstrom experience was supposed to be, a helpful sales rep, a delightful environment to be in. Like there's high quality materials, things are laid out nicely and aesthetically. The lighting is nice. The person runs back and gets you a different size shoe if it's this one doesn't fit, and they're nice about it and they're helpful and they suggest styles and put things together and they have add-on, right? So that's part of the experience. But the key element was if the purchase didn't work out, they were maniacal about having a really flexible return policy. They wanted you to be happy
Yeah.
above all else. And that component right there, to me, that was a bigger linchpin to their brand of associating luxury. Because what's more luxurious than if I'm not completely satisfied, you can return it. Right now, they try to angle towards a more premium crowd, which can be both more choosy, more particular, but also they aren't going to waste their time like abusing that. Generally speaking, you're always going to have some percentage that do, but just knowing they can do it made that buyer feel better about the purchase. Now Costco, complete polar opposite. It's literally like major warehouse shelving, most fluorescent lighting, like,
Hey,
like
don't hate on my childhood, man.
no, no, I love Costco. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I go there all the time, right? But like, if you think about what the environment is, right? What does the
Yeah.
brand like? Do you think Costco obsesses about their typeface as much as Nordstrom does, or the white space on their website, like being just right and aligned just so with a nice thin, like no, like they have a website that's very utilitarian, like that's their shtick. But what is Costco known for? An amazing return policy, right? And they've ratcheted back on that a little bit, that if you're an abuser of that, because they are going to more mass market instead of the premium buyer. And so I think that they've had to lock down on it. But like you can see an entire subreddit of people that have just the most ridiculous Costco returns you've ever seen, of like a couch from 1995 that they're trying to return because they're unhappy with it, or rear projection TVs which hadn't even been sold in more than a decade, probably more like two, returning it, right? Like it's absurd the kind of stuff that they will take back if you're not completely satisfied. But it is one of those elements that makes people like die hard loyalists. So,
Mm,
they always know they're getting a good deal, but they know they're getting a good deal and it's returnable if it
yeah.
doesn't work out, and they're not going to get hassled about it.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
kinds of things become so strongly connected to your brand that they become inseparable. Like when people talk about Costco, what do they say? Great deals, great return policy. That becomes your brand. And people just instinctively know that. And so they will pick you over anything else, even if it's a slightly better deal, but not as good a return policy, or someone else claiming a return policy that's really good, but you don't know if that's going to be a big hassle. Like this has become such a lockstep thing. And that was something that I really think Nordstrom's pioneered. And these are things like, again, they are completely intertwined with your brand, and they are things that you can convince people to say in the room when you are not there.
Yeah.
That's how you create intense, rapid loyalty. Like, did you know that, for instance, did you know that Costco clothing outsells just about every other clothing brand on the planet?
No.
Kirkland's Signature Clothing is like one of the top three by revenue. And think about how hard that is when you're selling $9
Oh
pants.
my
By
God.
revenue, their clothing, it's not because it's the most fashionable, but it has become like a brand, literally a branding mark for people to buy like Kirkland's Signature hoodies, right? Because it's cheap, it's amazing. They've got this like strong bond with the brand. That is like loyalty that we all strive for in our businesses, and almost no one can do it. But you have to have something that truly stands out, that is exceptional in a objective way, that makes people absolutely in love with you as a brand.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about keeping that promise. If you say that you do, give out free samples, which Costco's fantastic for. But if you do say we have a return policy that's incredible and customers love us for it, then you better have that return policy that accepts couches from 1995. That's incredible.
Yeah,
That's
I would be
incredible.
mortified. I would never, ever, ever, ever be caught dead doing that. But
Oh my
the
gosh.
fact that people do it, and the fact that Costco allowed it, I mean, that's clearly abuse, right? But it really
Right.
underscores the lengths they're willing to go to sustain that status of you will always be satisfied with your purchase, or you can return it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Cool. Well, I don't really have too much to add here personally. I don't know if you do, but when you're thinking about your brand, the only thing I'd like to kind of just reiterate here is, what can you do that is exceptional? How can you be consistent in your follow through? And can it be something that's noteworthy enough that people talk about it in the room when you're not there? If you're doing those things, you will tend to build very loyal people that will associate that when they see your logo or hear your name.
Yep, and that's really it. I think if you want to learn more about brand, you can either re-listen to this podcast over again or watch this video over again, or I would be careful about Googling it or Chat GPTing it because brand lives in the minds of your customers. So I would focus on speaking to them if before doing any major brand upheavals that we narrowly avoided talking about. So brand lives in your customers, so ask them, beg for feedback, and follow through on your promises with them. And I believe that's how to do it.
A great thing you can do too is actually ask for anonymous feedback about like what do you think about when you see this brand, and make sure that they know that it's anonymous, and make sure that it really is anonymous. Because what you want to figure out is, what do they actually think about you when there's no repercussions to what they think? Because that says a lot. Like that is your brand, right? That is what they're saying in the room when you're not there. Not just that they're telling you, "Oh, David, I love your newsletter. It's so great." You're like, that's fantastic, but I want to know, what would you text someone about it if they asked you? It's
Ooh.
great, but what's the asterisk? Where are the holes that I can fill?
Yeah, yeah. That's a really interesting idea. I might actually implement that. I'm gonna
Well,
write that down.
if we have another topic that comes up sooner or later this in the future, let us know and we'll do a quick update on that. But anyway, I think we've gone
Cool.
long enough on this personally, but uh, build your brand, make your customers care, give them something that they can care about and get behind, especially if it feels like a movement. I think that will be beneficial. If you want to learn more about it, as always, we have the article down below about how to create loyalty through brand experience. If you want to use email to strengthen that brand, Campaign Refinery is a great tool to that to stay top of mind and be communicating with your customers and prospects on a regular basis. And David, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, if you're building a newsletter brand and you are looking to exit it, you can go to wealthyinbox.news. I have a bunch of tips and tricks on what I'm doing to do the same. And from what I've seen from looking to acquire different brands and what turned me away as an investor, because some newsletters, they had a brand that worked for them and some of them had brands that didn't work for them. So yeah, you can head over to wealthyinbox.news and check it out.
Cool. Well, thanks, David, and we'll talk to you guys next time.